What's up, poopers? If you're anything like me, you've been stuck in the no beta club for Classic, forced to live vicariously through streamers on the outside looking in. It sucks. You want to play, you want to test leveling routes, follow my leveling guide, Joanna's or your own, but you know the private servers just aren't quite accurate enough. Well, this video is going to help with that a little bit. Through watching streams and testing during the stress tests, I've identified some major differences from Classic Beta and the more popular private servers so that you can anticipate the differences when they come around on August 27th. And as a result, hopefully us non-beta folks won't be stuck too far behind the beta boys. First, let's start with the 1 to 6 starter zones. In Classic WoW, the starter zones and the mobs are tuned much differently than on private servers. You might be thinking that since 1 to 6 is so short, it shouldn't have any major impact on your leveling, but the fact of classic leveling is that once someone is ahead of you, they'll stay ahead unless their route sucks or they die or they go to sleep. In Northshire Abbey, Coldridge Valley, Shadowglen, Valley of Trials, Deathnell, and Camp Tharache, the mobs on classic WoW are severely nerfed compared to private servers. Doing a simple combat log test, it showed that the mobs had slightly less HP on private servers. The lower end mobs did technically a little bit more damage than private server counterparts, but the biggest discrepancy was their avoidance. There appears to be some sort of newbie safety net placed on all enemies in the beginning zones in Classic WoW. On average, it seems they have a 1% chance to dodge, parry, or have your attacks miss. By comparison, private servers go all out with the standard avoidance values out the gate. The difference is a huge deal for melee classes when you pair it with the other differences I'll bring up soon. But right away, this should tell you that tagging mobs as a melee class, or with melee attacks in general for all classes, is much more reliable, as is casters' melee auto attack damage for when they are out of mana. The difference means that warriors, paladins, shamans, and rogues can much more reliably pull 2 to 3 of the level 4 starting area enemies early on without any threat of dying. The next difference is experience values. In this case, it seems the private servers like Light's Hope had accurate experience values for the starting quests, whereas some other repacks or Elysium had experience a bit higher than it should have been. This may cause you to overestimate the value of the 1 to 6 area quests when in fact, grinding on the 3 to 4 mobs and focusing on single objective quests should be your priority, which does lead us to the next point. Respawn timers. In private servers, dynamic respawns make it so that in general, all regular monsters respawn quickly when they are overfarmed. So even in crowded situations, it's possible to tough it out and get the quests done. Dynamic respawns, however, do not affect named mobs or lootable objects on private servers, and these differences are huge compared to Classic Beta. Firstly, dynamic respawns are not a thing at all in Classic Beta. Mobs have a static 5-minute respawn timers in Classic, and this means getting ahead of the zerg is crucial, and there are large amounts of bottleneck quests in the first few zones you'll need to find ways to work around, but I'll cover how to handle this in my next video. The other fact on Classic Beta is that named mobs and lootable object quests do respawn extremely fast. In some cases, the named mobs respawn less than a minute, and lootable objects respawn almost instantly. That means mobs like Garrick Padfoot or Sarkoth or Cactus Apples or Millie's Harvest are all completely easy to complete even within the zerg, which hugely contrasts to private servers where the respawns on named mobs and escort mobs usually completely deter you from doing those quests and steer you towards the other quests that are more dynamically respawning. This difference massively shifts your quest priority when trying to get ahead of the zerg, as it turns lootable object and named mob quests almost guaranteed completions, whereas kill and loot drop based quests are going to be more competitive if you're stuck in the zerg. Next, let's talk about general trash drops off of the monsters. It's common knowledge at this point that on private servers, extra bags drop way too much. On the 6 or so characters I saw hit level 10 in the stress test, only one of them got a single 6-slot bag. That sounds pretty bad until you look at the flip side. For every character I leveled in Classic Beta stress test, they were fully geared by the time they left the 1 to 6 area. The trash armor drops are excessive in Classic Beta, which drastically changes the lower level meta. Let me put that into perspective a bit. On private servers, on average, at level 6, a warrior will have 2 pieces of leather armor, 1 piece of cloth, and 2 pieces of mail and a cape. And every single one of those gear pieces are quest rewards, forcing you to either do the starter 1 to 6 quests or be naked. However, in Classic Beta, the warrior I leveled left the 1 to 6 area in full mail armor, and almost all of it was dropped off of the mobs I killed, and more silver from vendoring the trash drops as well. When you combine this with the other facts thus far, you should put together the pieces and see that 1 to 6 quests are extremely low valued in Classic Beta. And you should focus your 1 to 6 leveling efforts on two things. You should grind the level 3 to 4 mobs to hit level 5, and do the named mob and loot object quests, because you can expect to have full armor and the quests outside of the starter zone are available at level 5. Once you ding level 5, you can just get the heck out of there. The downside of all the loot is that your bags fill up way faster and your bags will be smaller, so you'll need to dump a lot of starting silver into 6-slot bags to increase your income. So these differences have ripple effects that carry on way beyond level 6 outside of the starter zones and affect your leveling all the way up. One takeaway is that melee classes are massively easier to level on Classic Beta than on private servers because of the avoidance, gear, and hit points differences that you'll feel for quite a while. For example, the level 9 to 10 Prowlers in Elwyn risk killing you every single time you pull one on private servers, but in Classic Beta they just fall over. Next, let's talk about mob positioning and their aggro radius. In addition to their long respawn timers on Classic Beta, private servers also apparently got the aggro radius and their overall positions wrong. This was noticeable right away in the starting areas, in clustered areas such as the Fargo Deep and Jasper Lode Mine. Many pulls that were deadly 2 to 3 man pulls on private servers were very simple, easy single pulls on Classic WoW. In addition, spell tuning for the monsters and their damage felt way off. For example, the Kobold Geomancers' fireballs dealt almost half the damage on Classic WoW than they did on private servers. It was much easier to separate the mobs that were close together, and the great news is that fanning is still a thing, where you can keep attacking one mob in a large pull and leash the other mobs to kill them one at a time. The smaller aggro radius does affect profession leveling like herbalism and mining, as it's much easier to grab the nodes. However, let's talk a little bit about professions now. Gathering professions specifically are not at all worth taking while leveling, not even skinning. The amount of trash drops that fill up your bags is more than enough to overtake the value of skinning. Additionally, because your health regen is higher, you don't need the extra downtime that skinning offers. It becomes flat out a waste of time unless you are doing leatherworking. Node spawns from mining and herbs are much lower. It's not viable with any form of competition at the server launch without wasting hours upon hours to level these, so I recommend completely skipping them if you want any chance at beating the zerg. Cooking and first aid are still hunky dunky though. Next up is quest requirements and quest chains. Quite a few quests have been discovered to have prerequisites that were otherwise not known on private servers or require cooking skill. While the majority of private servers are accurate to their quest paths, a few of them are off, and if you are following a guide like mine or Joanna's, don't fret too much. The guides will be updated to show the correct quest paths by the time the game launches in August. The last major difference we'll cover is elites and elite damage. Dungeons in Classic Beta are very significantly easier than on private servers. Mobs hit almost half as hard. This makes it much more easy to grab a pug and just run the dungeon for some loot upgrades. It also increases the potential viability of AoE grinding dungeons instead of questing out in the open world. So for now, that's all of the major differences I'll cover between private servers and Classic World of Warcraft's beta. If you're like me, stuck out of the beta, it can be pretty depressing. You see how much easier and different Classic WoW leveling is, and how big of an advantage the speedrunners in beta will have over those of us stuck outside. Hopefully with this information you can start rearranging your route and plan for what Classic will actually be like as you're stuck practicing on the harder private server versions. I've noticed a lot of hunters in beta saying, yeah, it's pretty much the same as a repack leveling in Classic Beta, but for melee classes it's massively easier on Classic than private servers. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel for us warrior, paladin, rogue, and shaman players. One thing I can suggest to adjust your test runs on private servers is to sell your 6-slot bags and buy armor early on to help simulate your expected loot drops. I'm sure you can come up with more adjustments yourself. Let me know in the comments section below if you've noticed any other drastic differences between private servers and the Classic Beta, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more leveling Classic WoW content. The next video will be covering on how to get ahead of the launch day zerg, but for now I am booping out.
boop.